So with that, I'd like to welcome our facilitator, Rich Maiore from Rocket Social Impact, and our panelists, Lacey Gayton, my colleague at ACCP, Joni Finch from Goodyear, and Kylene Anthony from the Caterpillar Foundation. Rich, I will let you kick it off.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Rich Maiore from Rocket Social Impact. Rocket is a CSR consultancy. We help companies with their CSR strategy and communication. I have been partnering with ACCP for a few years now on a variety of things. So excited to bring this today. What we're talking about, ERGs, BRGs, IRGs, they all mean generally the same thing. Employee Resource Group, Business Resource Group, Integrated Resource Group is a term I've been hearing recently as well. They are rising in importance. Why? Employees are important to companies for a variety of reasons, but to recruit and retain good talent requires a few things. Increasingly, it requires having a purpose, having a role for these employees beyond just helping drive profit. We're also seeing, these employees coming in with passion and they want to be engaged around issues. So employee resource groups have really kind of spiked over the last few years. What's been interesting to me and I'm sure others in the space has been watching the intersection between how ERGs meet CSR and why. I would like to think it's strategic. I also think it's a bit out of necessity as CSR teams find themselves looking for ways to raise awareness, raise engagement, bring ideas. ERGs have been kind of sitting there as this kind of unknown secret power, unknown, not so much unknown, but certainly underutilized when it comes to CSR. So you have this great intersection. And so now ERGs are playing a much more critical additive role to CSR strategies, be it raising dollars, bringing ideas, or helping implement. So today we're going to share some ideas. We're going to share a lot of great research that ACCP did last fall with Salesforce. And then we're going to share some examples. And from our panelists, they're going to talk specifically how they try to do it. It's not all roses. There are some challenges here. We're going to talk about that as well. Hold the questions till the end. We will leave time for those and get through them as we wrap up. So first, let's dive into, we're going to kick off with the data. This is interesting because I haven't seen any research before this came out around specifically ERGs. So think about it as kind of ACCP and Salesforce got together and last fall shared these results. It's really kind of opening up the hood, if you will, and looking at ERGs and some of the data around it. So Lacey, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of walk us through broad strokes, what we found.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so last year, after, we had started receiving questions really since the summer of 2020 about employee resource groups and what does that look like when it comes to your CSR efforts and how are your CSR teams integrating or owning or being involved in the development of ERGs and their activities. And so together with Salesforce, we did a survey to really kind of understand the structure and the funding and the purpose of ERGs and think about how that relates to our efforts as CSR practitioners. So one of the things that came out of it is really that ERGs are grassroots initiatives. They are created by employees for employees. In our survey, more than 50% of the respondents indicated that ERGs are generally created at the behest of the employees. Now, there's a lot of other leaders and departments that are engaged and involved in these, but really they start with the employees. And that's a really important thing to know when you're thinking about what is the purpose and the role of the ERGs, that it is generated by that employee interest. We also found that leadership of the ERGs is really shared between that volunteer, passionate employee who's interested about it and the company. And so one of the things we looked at is that emphasis on the combination of volunteer leadership and designated company leadership and guidance is important. More than 40% of the respondents have some sort of executive leadership involvement, whether that was an assigned executive sponsor, a volunteer, or perhaps even part of that executive leader's job description. But that combination of a volunteer and the directed company support was definitely showing up when we were figuring out what that structure around ERGs was. We also looked at what is the purpose of ERGs? Why are we having these? And what really shone out, and you can see it here on the chart on the screen, is that the majority of respondents indicated the primary objective was to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then if you also look at some of the other data points that rose, there is also that combined, if you look at foster a positive work culture, engage employees with one another, engage employees in something they care about, another key objectives of ERGs is really around that employee engagement. So while they are, that primary shows up around DEI, a big part of it is engaging your employees in the work that you're doing. And even for several of those who indicated other or might have expressed several of the above as the primary objective, it really was looking at that employee focus around ERGs. So we also wanted to know really specifically how ERGs are contributing to a company's CSR efforts. And when we looked at that, while the primary purpose was around DEI, again, a key byproduct of the ERGs is supporting the company's volunteer efforts. So they're participating in volunteer activities that they may coordinate themselves. They are huge supporters of company coordinated or organized volunteer activities. They are working with the CSR team on raising funds for local community efforts and supporting what the CSR team is doing, like providing advice or feedback on who and where the CSR team is funding. So although there's that DEI aspect that shows up as a primary objective, there is a lot of tie-ins with the company's CSR and volunteer efforts as well. Another key takeaway from the survey that we found was really looking at what are the business benefits of ERGs. At some companies, they are called BRGs, business resource groups. There is that tie-in to what the company is trying to do. And it's a lot around promoting DEI, fostering a positive work culture, and really affecting positive change in the community. So while these are organized by employees and for employees, there's a huge benefit to the company from having the ERGs. And that's something that we think is very powerful for what we're trying to do with ERGs and how CSR can play a role in working with the ERGs. There's a lot of great data that came out of the survey, really looking at, how ERGs are supported. But one of the things that we also saw that was coming out of it was looking at what are those areas of opportunity. So we did ask a question around how effective their ERGs were in achieving those objectives. And a little more than half of them said that they're somewhat effective in achieving the primary objective. So there really is that opportunity to have that improvement, to really make sure that ERGs are doing what they were created for, both for the employees and for the company. Another thing that showed up was that more than 80% of the respondents indicated that the company does provide budget to support their ERG programming. But where, what department, how that budget is funded really varied a lot. And one of the things that we heard was many of those budgets are held by a specific executive sponsor. And while that can be a good thing for an ERG, where it gets a little dicey is that if that executive sponsor leaves, if their role changes, if something changes with that executive leadership, what does that do to the ERG's budget? So one thing that we saw coming out of this is that there really needs to be more of a defined and steadfast support, budgetary support for those ERGs. It's, in some cases, it's not a sustainable model. So if the executive sponsor leaves, if the department funding changes, what does that do to the ERG's budget? And then finally, we asked about compensation and recognition for the ERG leaders. And one thing that really shows up is, we've talked a lot about, and we've heard a lot about, these are by employees and for employees, but that can, sometimes be a little problematic because it demonstrates that there's a burden placed on employees to lead some DEI efforts, to lead some very important business objectives for the company, and it's above and beyond their job. They're not compensated for it. They aren't receiving, the leadership development or recognition for the work that they're doing. And it's above and beyond their day job. It's side of the desk work. And so what can we really be doing to ensure that those ERG leaders who are passionate and volunteering their time to do this are appropriately compensated and recognized and given the opportunities to grow within their companies as they take on these ERG leadership roles? So that's a quick preview of what we were looking at when we, wanted to understand how do ERGs and CSR connect and relate, and where is that business benefit coming out of. And so I know Sarah did drop the chat, the link to the full survey if anyone has some more information, but I'm excited to dive into the conversation now. So Rich, I'll turn it back over to you as we kind of talk about some real world examples of ERGs in practice.
Yeah, thanks, Lacey. A lot to unpack there. Colleen, would love to hear from you. And for anything jump out at you, surprise you one way or the other as you were looking at some of these? I wrote down a few, but I was curious if you had any thoughts there.
No, I mean, I don't think there's anything that's surprising from our side. I think a lot of it aligns with what we're seeing at our company as well, but definitely very interesting statistics as well.
What about that 55% found they're somewhat effective in kind of achieving the objectives of building culture, advancing DE&I? That number I felt was a little low, but I turn to you, Joni. You're giving me the kind of head, maybe not.
Thanks, Rich. Honestly, that wasn't surprising to me.
No.
I don't think in the space that I am. I think part of it is, I think we have some pretty effective ERGs, but I think it's the goal that continues to change. So I think in the objectives, I think that's part of that challenge. The only other thing that surprised me a little bit was the budget representation, like where the budget is sitting within the organization. It was the first time I'd really seen that a budget would sit with a sponsor, or, it gets tucked into something based on someone who's really engaged instead of kind of having a formal approach to that. So I found that to be interesting for me, but otherwise everything else was pretty aligned to what I've been seeing in my time involved with ERGs.
Yeah. So kind of validating.
Yes.
There's a lot of validation there, which was nice. Lacey, it's certainly kind of, to me, said, ERG is a little more popular than ever these days. But they're being asked to do a lot. If you thought about those objectives, there were 7 or 8, and then you had the other category. So they are being asked to do a lot. Colleen, is that your experience you're feeling at the Caterpillar Foundation of, hey, suddenly we have this new toy, if you will, in the ERGs, and we're asking it to do them to potentially do a lot, or do you try to keep it a bit more focused?
Yeah, before I get too far into the foundation's partnerships, I will say with the findings and what you had in the report, I think, it's similar to what we see with our Caterpillar ERGs. They're incredibly passionate about the time and effort that they're putting into their communities and the resources. And so, as your study showed, it's obviously the ERGs are a lot of times promoting that D&I throughout. But I think it also, as we see that shift in the workforce, and they're another critical piece to engagement and awareness on the CSR side. And ERG groups are that important piece to involving our local community efforts altogether. So that growth and outreach, as the report stated, is really kind of that natural step that needs to take place moving forward. But absolutely, the foundation has very much begun to partner with our ERGs more and more in a lot of variety of ways. Given that the foundation's the private legal entity and things like that, we have some limitations, but we've found a lot of collaborative opportunities over the last several years. Some of the things we look at with our ERGs is how can we improve how we approach the programs using their expertise, mobilizing them through volunteer engagement opportunities, speakers, panelists sharing their knowledge at partner events, fundraising around charities around the world, and really just driving that awareness internally and externally. The foundation's done a lot of things over the last couple of years with our ERGs. One of those examples we have in 2020, we actually started a partnership with the Manufacturing Institute to expand the Heroes Make Americas program. It's actually a Department of Defense skills bridge program designed to provide the workforce training programs for active military as they approach discharge. And so as we assess the needs and the structure of that engagement, our Armed Forces Support Network, our ERG for the Armed Forces, they provided kind of the reaction and input on how our program could really be effective with that DoD's current transition assistance program. And so really leveraging their experience, their transition from military to civilian life, it really provided that perspective that we needed from the foundation when we co-developed these programs with the Manufacturing Institute.
Yeah, kind of a built-in focus group.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with expertise.
Sure.
And I hate to put you on the spot, ballpark.
No.
How many ERGs do you have at Caterpillar?
We have 14 in total.
Okay. And has that grown pretty rapidly, or is it incremental?
It stayed pretty steady.
Yeah.
And we have some that have been around for, I think, decades, but I don't think we've added too many in recent years. So that we have quite a few. Yeah.
All right, but that's still a lot of herding of cats, if you will, in terms of.
It is. Sure.
Yeah, got it. And that was terrific. Joni, give me a sense of what are we talking here at Goodyear?
Sure.
In terms of number and then kind of how they work.
Yeah, so we have 72,000 employees worldwide at Goodyear. We have 8 different ERGs and 32 chapters. So what that means is at the headquarters here in Akron, we have each different ERG, each type of ERG, and then the team in Akron is actually, Akron's our headquarters, we're in Akron, Ohio. They're actually responsible for the chapters that are underneath them in different countries around the world. So, pretty robust programming so far. They have, they focus on networking, they focus on retention, development. One of the newest things that has happened over the last several years is every single ERG has a community outreach chair. This is new for us. We've had most of them had it, but not every single one. So this is something that we've been working towards. I should also mention our because I'd be remiss if I didn't share that our Goodyear Women's Network is actually celebrating 100 years this year. So our ERGs, we're really proud of that. They're proud of it. I should have brought my mug. They gave me a mug. Actually, it's right here. I did have it.
Let's see that.
You can see my 100 years of women's
100-year-old ERGs.
Yeah, this mug is not 100, nor is the candy in it. But we're really proud of that work, and we've been really working closer with them. So one of the models that we adopted is when you take these intersections, so you look at learning and development and community outreach and even some of the networking and the work that's happening in there, we actually have this model where the functional leader for that space, so the Goodyear, so I'm responsible for community engagement at Goodyear, so that all of the community outreach chairs actually sort of dot line into my team. So while the diversity and inclusion team here at Goodyear really sort of quote unquote leads the ERGs, they're the ones that own the budgets and those types of things, although I do fund for them a little bit. But so they're the ones that kind of own the organization, the effort. All of the outreach chairs have to, but they do. They meet with someone on my team every single month. They align their efforts. That's how they find out about things. They collaborate on things, etc. And it's same with the learning and development team. So there's someone on the head of learning and development meets with all of the ERG leads who do this type of work. So this is something we adopted probably about, I don't know, 18 or 19, right before the pandemic, really, we started to kind of shift in this way. And it really has allowed us to do exactly what we're here to talk about, which is engage these employees, these ERGs with the CSR work that I'm doing. So, and that's how we do it. Everyone's kind of mentioned it so far. It's volunteering with company supported events. We are actually, today is the last day of our Global Week of Volunteering. So what we did is see that those associates in ERGs will actually own events, and they'll want to do that around the world. We have, other types of events like our, we have a couple different races that we work with. We've got different speaking engagements that we do in the community. Our ERG leadership represents us in different events in the community. The other thing from a funding perspective that I'll mention is that, they have their budgets. Each one of them has their own budgets. It's the same amount that each ERG, each chapter gets. That's not my budget. However, they're not necessarily funding community efforts in that budget. I want them to come to me with that stuff. And then we work on that together. You mentioned it earlier. They're a built-in focus group for me. So I have conversations with different community organizations that would tie into one of our ERGs, I grab either my community outreach chair, my president, and bring them along with me, because it's somebody who can really help me as we're moving forward with some of these decisions. So just a little bit of how we operate there.
Wow, that's a lot going on there. So I'm curious, and Kylie, I didn't ask you this question, how are they funded, the ERGs at Caterpillar, via Caterpillar Foundation?
Sure. Yeah. Let me make sure I was off mute. Yeah. So very similar to how the research was noted, and the majority is our Caterpillar ERGs are overseen by our HR team. Budgets are given to them annually, similar to as Joni mentioned. We have our 14. They have the executive sponsors, their leaders, members, and they all drive their each individual goals. And of course, they're playing a critical role to our company's global D&I framework, and really driving that impact, reinforcing leadership behaviors and accountability, contributing back to that community. In addition, as Joni kind of mentioned, also a lot of our ERGs, given that we're global, we have some of the structure in place where you're going to have localized chapters that are organized and led locally as well.
Got it. And so Lacey, global, local, doesn't matter. What are some, from the research as well as your experience looking around at and working with companies all the time through membership of ACCP, what are some kind of benchmarks of, hey, this is an effective ERG? They have, these kind of traits, if you will.
Yeah. And it is one of the findings that we saw in the research that that volunteer led is important. The employees that have the desire and the passion to move the goals of that ERG forward, but it's equally as important to have that executive leadership and support there. So it's the, top down, bottom up feature that really helps these ERGs be successful, because the employees that are leading the efforts need the support of leadership to advance their goals and to move forward. And if the company really wants it to be a part of, their D&I framework or their business objectives as part of their overall purpose, the company needs to have some skin in the game as well. They need to be supporting those ERGs. So while the passion and the volunteerism of the employees who are leading the charge on much of this work is so vital, you have to have that leadership support and the buy-in from the company so that they can really move forward and achieve the objectives that they're trying for. And it's behooves the company really to support their ERGs. Benevity just released their 2022 State of Corporate Purpose report, and they had some really interesting stats in there about the value and the benefits of belonging as you're looking at employees. And it's both the employees that you have, where 50% of employees said that they would stay at a company because it offered ERGs. So half of your employee base is looking to stay at a company if they offer ERGs. And then if you're looking at your, potential employees, there was another report that they cited where 70% of US respondents 18 to 24 years old said that they would be more likely to apply for a role at a company that had ERGs. So when you're looking at your talent pool and the employees, especially as we're thinking about, talent right now and the conversation of the Great Resignation, the reshuffle, all of that's going on, the company needs to really support what their ERGs are doing and, provide that backing, provide the funding, provide the leadership guidance.
50% of people said they work somewhere where there are ERGs. That number surprised me. I didn't know most folks knew what ERGs were from the outside looking in. So that's terrific. So we've talked about, they have a lot of different purposes, the trademarks of what looks like a good ERG. How do you know they're working? And anecdotally, I hear from you, Kylie, and hey, we've been able to, you gave the great example with the Armed Forces ERG. Do you put any measures against any of these ERGs in terms of your work with them integrated? I'm just curious, aside from anecdotal, how do you kind of show, as you try to defend budget or even grow budget around ERGs, how do you make the case?
Yeah, for us in the foundation, the budget doesn't reside with us. It resides within HR for the ERGs. But when it really comes to the impact and our collaboration, a lot of it is partnership. where can we make the greatest impact in our Caterpillar communities and also leverage the expertise that we have of our ERGs. And, we've been able to do that through a variety of the examples. Another one that I can share is the foundation has an active interest in advancing our strategy across Africa. And in order to secure kind of some of those local perspectives, our chief strategy officer for the foundation also serves as a board member on the Africa Business Resource Group, one of our ERGs, with the purpose of really getting a better understanding and perspective. What are those community needs in Africa from individuals who do the work there and are regularly, obviously have that perspective in that continent.
Fascinating. Hey, Joni?
Yeah, well, a couple things. So similar, the budgets actually sit in HR within the diversity and inclusion, and they do have some metrics that they measure, mostly around, how many of their members are engaging in things, what types of things they're doing. We do include, this actually came from them, they include a volunteer hour goal that each ERG participates, that they came up with on their own, and asked me, and I'm like, great, go do it. It's been wonderful. Nice way for them to measure their outreach efforts. Now, from a funding perspective for me, and similar to what Colleen was saying, but really around this idea of, where do we need to sit within the community? So using those local ERG members to really say, where do we need to be when it relates to the whatever topic that their ERG represents. And so, so it does, I wouldn't say it bases, I make funding decisions based on their engagement, although I do sort of, because if they're not helping me along as this process, then we're probably not going to be funding in that area as much if I'm dragging them along. Whereas if they're highly engaged, so that would probably make a difference there a little bit. But that's really how we determine our measurement. There's a few other things that D&I is measuring. Mm-hmm. I will mention we have a global diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership council. So this would, or executive council. So this would be like more mid to high level leaders across the globe that serve as that council. These employee resource groups, they do work with them pretty closely as well on the awareness piece and inclusion piece, and they have a couple measurement tools around, or measurement items around some of the awareness. We're doing some bias training right now as an organization. Certain leaders are participating in that, and the ERGs are heavily involved in that. So they're helping get the word out. They're helping bring to life some of this training that we're having, across the board, which has been really helpful to have that at a local level.
You're getting a lot out of these folks. This is good. Yeah. Kylie, tell me, you mentioned helping drive awareness a lot, several times, and we are seeing ERGs as internal communication around CSR gets a bit harder because the internal channels are getting more and more filled with other things. COVID-related certainly is there. We're finding ERGs, again, a very powerful force to help drive awareness among the non-converted, if you will, around CSR, the company's CSR. They don't know it, or they don't really know much about it. ERGs are. How do you empower ERGs to kind of tell the story for you among employees around the Caterpillar Foundation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think as we've found different collaboration opportunities to pull in the variety of groups, it seems to have just spurred more and more opportunities. And they tend to talk amongst each groups as well, and employees serve on a variety of ERGs. So it's not unusual for us to collaborate on one project and then have another ERG reach out and say, hey, I've got something, here, can we look at that? One of the other examples that we actually did recently, which covered all of our ERGs, was our Giving Tuesday. So last year we offered a 2-to-1 matching gifts. But instead of the standard Giving Tuesday communications, our goal really was to collaborate with our ERGs. And so through that collaboration, each of our ERGs identified a charity of their choosing that was passionate for their group. We took that list and then promoted those charities as well as the ERGs throughout our communication channels during that 3-week time frame for Giving Tuesday. And collectively, just through our communications, we were able to raise almost $100,000 for those charities just nominated by the ERGs. So
kind of real quickly, you had a workplace giving campaign kind of like that.
Yeah.
Grassroots driven, certainly impactful. And because they got to choose, they're more passionate about it and more engaged?
Absolutely.
Okay. And when it comes to overall CSR and the Caterpillar's foundation, its mission, its purpose, do ERGs have a good sense of, are they able to be your ambassadors for Caterpillar, not just within the company, but externally as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we recently changed our strategy or made a shift in our strategy a couple of years ago. So as we continue to grow and get more of our new strategy out there, our ERGs are a great opportunity for them to communicate that message, especially internally to our employees, and get them to understand all of the great work that we're doing that then also aligns with their ERG networks as well.
Got it. Joni, something similar there? Are you kind of training them, train the trainer model in the sense of train them to then talk about it internally in terms of Goodyear's efforts?
Yeah, yes, for sure. I think in general, so I mentioned that model before where each ERG has an outreach chair, and the I guess you could say dot lines into the functional leader. Same with communications. So each ERG has a communications chair. That communications chair dot lines into someone who manages communications for HR and DE&I. So it's really helpful as we start to align the message. They're hearing the same things across the ERGs. They're also able to kind of be that coordinate their efforts to make sure that the messaging is getting there. But absolutely, we're constantly putting messages through our ERGs. We're also like lifting their voices. Sometimes the message lands differently when it comes from the president of an ERG versus a global communications and internal communications, whatever box you have. So we will do that as well and leveraging that. So again, it's that collaboration and alignment to be able to have those conversations to say, hey, we're going to communicate this. The other thing that's happened, and this has again been newer for us in the last probably 4 or 5 years, has really been this collaboration across ERGs. So you're seeing it so much, especially in communications where, just last week we had an ice cream social where our ADAPT group collaborated with our women's network, and they had an ice cream social, but then it had some pretty key messages that touched both women and those with disabilities. And it was it's kind of interesting to watch that happen more and more as these ERGs, they're realizing that you talked about the channels getting bombarded, and that's true, but it's also like our capacity for information tends to be in our time, right? The events and the way that that's happening, each ERG can't have an event every day. And so what you're seeing is a lot more of that collaboration and support to one another. Right now we're in Pride Month. And so you'll see the support across the other ERGs supporting Pride. You'll see, we had Memorial Day where you had different things going on supporting our Veterans Association around that. And that type of collaboration is what we have to see, because there's no room for everyone. To be honest with you, if we all have 20,000 messages, there's just not room for that in all of our capacity to take communications in. So that's been our model so far.
Mm-hmm. Which really tees up well. And Lacey, you kind of called out some of the opportunity areas when it comes to ERGs is around recognition, around even some kind of stipend. Unpack that a little bit, and then I want to jump back into kind of how do you keep these ERGs on message, on strategy, because they're certainly more empowered now and want to play more of a role in, which is great, but you also want to make sure that they're doing it the right way. But first, Lacey, let's talk about the data and kind of opportunity areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we did ask a question around, how are ERG leaders compensated or recognized, because they really are doing some valuable work on behalf of the company, on behalf of our CSR teams, serving as focus groups or subject matter experts in specific areas, or really helping to kind of rebuild your company culture or rebuild relationships and bring employees together. They're doing some very powerful work. And when we looked at that, in our survey, about 65% of the respondents said that they were not compensating ERG leaders. Only about a third of the respondents said that they were doing some sort of recognition for them. And so when you think about, this is not this employee's job, this is not what they were hired to do, and they have some very powerful work that they're doing, we really need to think about how are we compensating them, whether that is a stipend, a salary, or it's something like professional development opportunities, recognizing their work in a way that you're saying, you're leading this ERG. How do we then take that, what you have learned as an ERG leader, and translate that into developing you as a leader for our company? They are out there messaging both to employees and externally to the community on behalf of your company. How are you then showing them that the work that they are doing is valuable and a benefit to the company and to them? And so there's a lot of conversations happening right now among ERG leaders and companies, the teams that are responsible for ERGs, around how do we value that work and what does that look like? Is it a stipend for your ERG leaders? Is it opportunity to have access to, C-suite leaders and mentorship? Is it professional development opportunities that you're giving specifically to your ERG leaders? Is it adding them to that leadership pipeline as they move up in their responsibilities as an ERG leader? There's a lot that can be done there, but not enough is being done right now. And there's actually an organization that has, for the last 2 years, done a study about the state of ERGs, and in 2020 only 6% of companies were compensating their ERG leaders, and in 2021 that bumped up to about 28%. And so it's slowly growing, and it doesn't have to be a monetary compensation, but they are doing work on behalf of the company, and how does that get recognized? And that's an area that we really need to start thinking about with our ERGs.
Those are some terrific ideas and suggestions there, Kylie. And I'm curious, how does it work at Caterpillar Foundation in terms of, or Caterpillar overall, in terms of recognizing these ERGs?
Sure. Yeah. Our ERG leadership roles are absolutely important and, critical to the success of our D&I work. So those leaders and key contributors to doing that work, we know that they're doing it on a daily basis on their volunteer time. Yeah. And aside from their regular jobs, they are recognized as a part of their leadership town halls that our leaders hold, as well as a lot of messaging and incorporating them into our Caterpillar overarching D&I conference each year, as well as far as recognition goes.
Got it. So certainly some badge value, if you will, in terms of being associated with. Joni, good year?
Yeah, similar. We do have an awards event that we do at the end of every year for diversity and inclusion, and usually there's some community stuff in there too. So they actually lead a lot of that themselves. So we make sure that there's a lot of recognition during that, as well as other town halls and events like Kylie said. The other piece that I'll add is part of the strategy. So anytime Goodyear sponsors something in the community, part of that falls into my team to make sure that we're meaningfully using the seats that we have at all the wonderful events that our community partners or sporting events or whatever it looks like is used meaningfully. And that's who I look to, right? First is those ERGs. Of course, I want them out representing us. And it's a nice recognition piece for them to give them to that type of an experience to go out and do that. And then I think the last piece is, and Kylie mentioned this a little bit, is really around helping the engagement with their senior leaders. So each one of our ERGs has a senior leader, so global senior leader, who's an executive sponsor. And then they have somebody who's going to be kind of the one level down as their second executive sponsor. And so having that visibility, and those senior leaders don't take those roles for granted. And they definitely make sure that these leaders of ERGs get the time with them. They have, coaching conversations. And I think that all is a part of some of those intangibles in being a part of an ERG. So we try our best to do some of that stuff. We're not like formally financially compensating today. We've talked about this in multiple occasions, but I think providing some of this more intangibles has been the way that we can recognize our ERG leaders.
Makes sense. We've been seeing a lot of more creativity around recognition as they're being asked to do more. We're trying to avoid the ERG burnout, which could happen. This is a nights and weekend type of role for them in many cases, but they're still asking me to do a lot. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges, where things haven't always worked, and you don't have to name names, but certainly I'd love to hear examples of kind of where things haven't always, when you've had an ERG network, when it comes to kind of the integration around your CSR strategy or employee engagement.
I'll leave the specific challenges to Joni, because from the Caterpillar Foundation perspective, we really have a whole lot of challenges, I'd say.
No?
Part of it is, we're really new to this space and certainly don't have it all figured out with the collaboration. So we like to say we're on a learning journey together, but we're growing through all of our collaboration opportunities, and we know there's so much more that we can do to partner with the amazing groups and make that collective impact. So Joni might have some challenges she can share.
All right.
Sure. So I'd say
put me on the spot here, Joey. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I was absolutely ready for this discussion,
Yeah,
for this question. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is continuity. So what happens a lot is, we have an ERG who's most of them, I think, are 2-year terms. So you have a leadership team in the ERG for 2 years, and then all of a sudden someone's got a different idea, and now they want to move into a different direction, and then you have a completely different piece of the puzzle. The other thing that happens is, and it goes along the same lines, is this idea of, oh, we're gonna bring in this big speaker, we're gonna do this stuff. And so I may have had the same discussion on why we're not gonna have a certain speaker in 17 times in the last 7 years, because it just depends on who's in that leadership role. So continuity is a really big challenge for us, because the new person comes in, and we do our best to do, we do the vice presidents along for the ride, and they're in all the executive meetings, and et cetera. So we do all of that, but it still doesn't change the fact that when that person gets in that leadership role, it starts to be like, well, these are my passions, and this is what I'm going to start pushing my agenda. And so as a functional partner, that becomes a little difficult, because it's like I'm having the same discussion year after year after year. So one of the things that we're doing to alleviate a little bit of that is really creating a digital onboarding for our ERGs. So at each position of our ERGs. So our president's going to look a little different than a vice president. So the community outreach chair, we're working on it right now, actually. It's a digital onboarding that kind of gives you the basics and sort of the guardrails. And I always tell ERGs, I'm not here to be road bumps for you by any means. I'm here to add value to you and help you with some of those, because we have an organization that and I'll just be transparent because we're all friends in the room, that we had a sex trafficking organization in here that Goodyear was engaged with back in the 30, 40, 50 years ago, and she called it out. We had somebody who called a couple Goodyear leaders out in a meeting, and those are things that I can help alleviate if you let me know ahead of time and help me give you some of that feedback. And so those are minor things, but it certainly is a challenge for us. The other piece is the participation. So we may have it, Kylene explained that there's ERGs and some of the same people in different ERGs. We see that as well. We had to put a stop, I think it was maybe 2016 and 17. They were measuring the number of events they were having. So they were having 150 events a year just in one building, and they were attended by 2 to 3 people. And so really it's more about this, how do we have engaged employees that are really participating? What's actually really adding value to them so that they want to take time out of their day and be a part of this event? And so participation can be a challenge to really find that niche and what people are really interested in. But the biggest thing by far for me is the continuity. As they change leadership over and over again, how do we keep them moving forward in what they're trying to accomplish?
Man, that is a lot of conversations like you're having. That's good and certainly valued. We have a client who empowered all their ERGs and really turned them loose and called me and said, I've created a monster. And they are now doing fundraising, they're doing volunteers, and they've really not aligned with our CSR strategy and our focus areas. You're nodding, Joni, has that happened, and kind of what do you do in that situation?
Yeah. It has. So they have a tough conversation with Joni, is usually what happens first. I wait to see if it gets escalated to me. No, we have. So the other pieces, we've had people putting donations on credit cards. So now I'm being called to the carpet for our travel and expense, the people who process the credit cards for us. So we've had a lot of those types of challenges as well. Again, part of it is really these guardrails around the onboarding, right? It's really making sure that they're aware of what they should be doing. We also have our ERGs they have to create an annual plan. I don't care if it's perfect. I don't care if it's all thought through. That's not, I'm not putting more work on you, but I need to understand before we move forward what your goals are for the year in community outreach and what you're going to engage with. And so actually at this point, no ERG is supposed to be spending a dime with a nonprofit without my approval, or I should say someone from my team's approval. Okay. But that piece of it is really, we hate to be so tough on that. And we try to be so quick about it. I'm not trying to add roadblocks, but we've had those challenges before. And really the only way around it is to explain why. The other thing that's happening right now, so we're Akron, Cleveland. So if anybody knows, I'm sure everyone knows where Cleveland is. Akron's about 30 miles south, or 30 minutes south, I should say, not quite miles. And we have a Pride here. Cleveland has a Pride. We have an associate who's in the president of Pride right now who lives in Cleveland. So he wants to be involved in Cleveland. And then I have another group that's really, engaged in Akron. And so sometimes we have to be the ones to be air traffic control and really ask those tough questions to say, where's our audience? Like, how do we need to have we can't just take all our money in Akron and move it to Cleveland because of we're here. This is our footprint, right? This is where we grew up 124 years ago. So it's things like that we have to make sure that these ERGs know. And a lot of times I don't have another answer besides it's a tough conversation to say, and it's tough because as CSR professionals, we have to sort of balance like our agenda and with their energy. Like we need to keep their energy and keep their engagement and keep their passion. So I don't want to be like, no, I want to say, let's kind of redirect this energy and into a different way. And so I have found personally that if I can approach them at the beginning of the year, each group, so I come in and I'm their little guest speaker in their first meeting of the year, and I'll say, hey, I need your help this year. And this is what I need your help to do. If I approach it like that, where they're my team and I need your help to accomplish X, Y, and Z this year, I found that they're much more honest with me throughout the year. They don't try to do the stuff behind your back. They want to be there for you and be a part of your team. And so that's the approach I take. Doesn't always work, but we try.
I love it. The benevolent dictator. I like it. And you have to, Kylie, I imagine you have to balance a lot of ERGs saying, can we do this? Can we do this? And making sure they all don't try to show up at the same time around, a social issue that could be tricky. Gun control, abortion rights, does that come up at all, Kylie, in terms of, hey, we want to talk about gun control based on what's been happening, and that's not an area you're comfortable with from a CSR point of view, or even a corporate point of view?
It's generally managed within our HR group, and
So
our senior leaders will certainly have the conversations. But Joni, to your point on some of your changeover that you have, when you have some of those leadership changes within your ERGs, I don't have the details on it, but do you have in Goodyear what we call a playbook for your ERGs of kind of what their expectations are? I didn't know if that's something that you have. Okay.
Yeah. Same similar type of thing. And now that playbook is just enhanced with this digital onboarding. So it's kind of like, what's your role in the playbook, what that looks like. And that has things like how to spend money and how to do these types of things. So we do have that, but the digital onboarding has to go with it because people don't read the playbook.
Understood.
I like the little sit down at the beginning of the year with you to kind of say, this is kind of where, and I think that sounds very effective. One last question to you all. Let's look in our crystal balls and kind of think ERGs. What's going to be happening in the ERG space over the next few years as obviously CSR and pure purpose continues to rise in terms of importance to employees? And these ERGs are working, as we've all discussed, and doing a variety of things. Where is this all going? What are some things we could be looking for in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think ERGs are uniquely positioned to become those conveners in the company. I think they have a tremendous opportunity to raise awareness for the issues and the organizations that they're most passionate about. But they can also bring a lot of innovative experiences and ideas and support in ways in which we can then continue to drive our awareness around corporate social responsibility in the foundation program. So I see them very much as conveners to bring us all together.
That's good. Very good. Lacey, what's your word? Eileen's got conveners. Where are the ERGs going here for you?
Growth. I do not think that ERGs are going away anytime soon. I think that they will continue to grow, both in how they are showing up at companies. We have, Goodyear is celebrating 100 years with one of their ERGs, and we have companies that are just starting their ERG programs. And I think we're going to just really continue to see growth with the ERGs, and both in growth within the company starting ERG programs, but also growth in the capabilities of what those ERGs are able to do and how they're able to integrate with CSR and DEI and really support the company's efforts and support the employee engagement as well. And, I think that we're going to see them become also more sophisticated in how they're doing the work that they're doing and what they're doing on behalf of companies. So, the time is now, if you haven't already, to really start thinking about how you as a CSR professional are coordinating and integrating with your ERGs.
Well said. All right, Joni, what do you got in your crystal ball?
So I'm going to say talent traction. I think that these ERGs are going to are really going to be key as we move forward. We've got a lot of diversity efforts, a lot that I'm doing in STEM around diversity right now, to bring the right workforce in the door. And I think my ERGs are going to continue to play pivotal roles in that. So in the innovation, I liked Kylene's comments around innovation and where we're headed. That we're going to continue to be pushing barriers in the innovative spaces, and our diverse employees are the ones that are going to make that, take it to the next level with those IDs. We're really excited about that as well. Can I answer one of the questions that I see? So,
jump ahead. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We only have 5 minutes, so I'm a talker. I apologize. But combating low engagement from ERG members on initiatives, especially with the remote workforce. So a couple of things I wanted to mention, and it kind of is a similar with international employee question as well. And it's really this concept of seeing what your employees want and make sure you're listening to them. Because I mentioned before where we had these events where at some point the focus became number of events instead of quality and what these employees want. We all know, I assume we all know that ERGs kind of have a different feeling in different countries. Some things are just a little bit less thought of. And so we really want to make sure we're leaning into what they want. And I think the other question for me, the other answer is it's peer-to-peer invitation. So I say this around volunteerism too, especially skills-based. If I want an engineer with a specific type of experience, I don't put a call out to 6,000 people about that. I make an individual ask, or an ask of person to person, and I'll ask somebody to ask somebody else. So it's a lot of times it's that peer-to-peer. Hey, you want to go with me to the flag raising this afternoon? We have a pride flag raising happening here in a week or so. It's me sitting at my desk and inviting somebody, or maybe the people I mentor in the building. Hey, would you guys like to come with me to this, guys and gals like to come with me to this flag raising? It's that stuff that can really help you, but it's mostly, for me, it would be about listening to what your ERGs want, what type of programming is going to resonate with them, and what's stuff they can pass on, because that's, you don't want to waste your time with or their time with all the planning that goes into these events.
Excellent. Hey, Kylie, there's a question specifically for you. Can you explain how company activates ERGs for volunteer opportunities related to the foundation's partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. And one that we've actually done in the last year. So to coincide with Caterpillar's 95th anniversary as a company, the foundation actually partnered with a nonprofit called One Tree Planted. And we organized tree plantings and restoration events in 95 communities around the world. Huge project. And so as we organized these events, we reached out to our young professionals ERG, who tapped into their global chapters and secured volunteers for the community-wide events to be able to work not only on those tree plantings, but also organize the events and really maximize that internal visibility with the activities. COVID had some impact on that, so we've had to make some shifts, of course, but continuing to work with them as we work on those tree plantings.
That's a terrific example. The program's successful?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well done. All right, gang. We could probably talk for a couple more hours. Maybe next time we do this like a full day thing. But this was great. But clearly, the bar's rising in terms of sophistication, in terms of innovation, and even coordination. Looking at my crystal ball, I take a little bit from all three of you. They're going to be asked to come up with better ideas, help bring their expertise. How can they rally others? And then how can they get better coordinated? That is becoming a challenge for CSR folks, is how do I coordinate these? So we actually even see one company has a director of ERGs, because that is their job, is to be the den mother to these ERGs and making sure they're coordinated to all the business priorities. So fascinating space. Lacey, thank you for the data and all the smart insights there. Kylie and Joni, thank you for your specific examples and your great insights. My email's there. If any additional questions come up, certainly email me, and then I will get the answers for you from one of our panelists. And I see Jean in the corner there, so that means the time is up. So Jean, I'll turn it back to you to wrap up.
Thank you, Rich, for hosting this session and for facilitating. Thank you to all of our panelists. This has been a really rich, interesting discussion, and I'm sure all the participants really benefited by it. My colleague Sarah just popped in the survey that we would love for you all to fill out and provide us feedback about the session. We take your feedback very seriously, and it helps us plan for future programs. And I just wanted to also just remind everybody that we do have one more CSR Marketplace live session this afternoon at 4:30 Eastern. I hope you can join us, and 2 more tomorrow. And with that, thank you for everyone participating and tuning in, and I wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.